CherryandStonePublishing.com presents an excerpt from Danthology 2022. Written by Dan Kirstein. Read by me, Dan Kirstein. The Work of Windsor Wasn't. There's no such thing as evil in London. There is darkness, violence, malediction, and a heaping smear of general grumpiness, but no evil. That's not to say evil hasn't visited every so often, such as that brief period from 1888 to 1891. But even then, if one had happened upon evil and consequently asked what it was doing there, evil would reply that it was only passing through. The most understandable euphemism that one can give to such a phenomena is equivalent to the patron saints in Catholicism. When a Catholic would lose something, they would pray to St. Anthony, and they may have found some moderate success doing so. But not all things want to be found. Some wanted to be lost. Thus came the need for the quite literally divine Windsor Wasn't. An older gentleman sat on the train. His slick, brown loafers led up to his navy blue suit, with his legs folded as neatly as the morning paper that stood open in his wrinkled hands. The crinkling of the paper had drawn the attention of a small boy across the aisle. The boy had every right to be curious, Windsor thought. After all, it's 2022. Who reads the paper anymore? Only those with a penchant for dying causes, such as Mr. Wasn't. After returning the boy's curious gaze, Windsor thumbed his current page, carefully removed the comics from the paper, and passed it across the aisle. The boy took it happily, which garnered the attention of his father. He thanked Windsor politely, before feeling the need to check that the tickets were still in his pocket. Windsor nodded under his brimmed hat, and smiled before returning to his paper. Mr. Wasn't leaned back in his seat and opened the paper once again, quite pleased with himself. Eventually, the train came to a stop, and Windsor stood up, happy to leave the paper on the seat behind him. He stepped onto the platform and extended his arm to check his watch. He didn't know why he did it. Entities such as himself are never late and are hardly ever bound to the concept of time. But something had changed along the way, and exhaustion grew upon him, worse by the day. He began to wonder if sooner or later he would be just like them. Perhaps he would arrive at a nursing home someday, a no-one who did nothing and had no idea where he came from. Human furniture. None would recognize him, even those he guided there. His face was, by design, instantly forgettable. But every face has wrinkles, especially the forgettable ones. He shook his head as he walked through the station, as if the thoughts of his immorality could be shaken from his ear. He arrived in the back seat of a waiting cab, closed the door, shook his mind free of its pestering shackles, and glanced at the driver through the rearview mirror. "To the pier, if you please." "Sure thing." He started the car before his fingers passed over his GPS. He'd thought better of using it. "No bags or nothing, eh? Where you from?" "Oh," Windsor mused, giving the most honest answer he could. "I don't even know anymore." They both feigned laughter. The cab pulled up to its destination, and Windsor's brown loafers stepped upon the black asphalt. He paid the driver, tipped him moderately, and turned away. He walked with a leisurely pace along the pier. He walked along the boards, accompanied by the occasional gull. He passed children with their parents and couples waxing romantic on various benches, and all other manner of the little lives that faded in and out of one's own existence. But as Mr. Wasn't walked, those things became less common. In fact, he watched as mothers pulled their children away from his destination. He arrived behind a crowd and found no trouble making his way to the front of it. He was stopped by an officer who was holding people back. Behind her was another officer, a man speaking to a young lady. The policeman stood behind a wooden chest-height rail that separated him from the young woman, who was 1 footstep away from a very sharp drop. Windsor watched as the young lady turned around. Her white t-shirt and pink skirt had both seen better days. He noticed a tear run down her swollen cheek. That part he was accustomed to, seeing people on their worst days. What he hadn't prepared for was what she said. "I'm so tired. All this." The girl's voice shakily called back to the officer, I don't want to do it anymore." Windsor scowled, and though he diligently waited for his cue to do his job, his mind raced. That's when she met eyes with him. It didn't require much, just his presence and a slight effort on his part. He puckered his lips and exhaled as if blowing out a candle. She fell. The people around him responded as they always did. The officer unsuccessfully attempted to grab her. The crowd, who came to watch a girl fall, all gasped and screamed when she finally did. It was all boring and predictable, which gave Windsor some time to look around. He searched the crowd for a familiar and ancient face, and found none. Death wasn't there. Windsor slipped off his loafers, removed his hat, and hurdled the rail. He splashed within the waters and dove deeper. Cold darkness surrounded him, and with it came the familiar pull of sleep. But he did not stop. His eyes did not open. They didn't have to. His hand knew its way to her wrist. The waters upon the shore were calm and indifferent, but from their waves there emerged a navy blue suit and a gasping old man. He dragged a young lady by the wrist and let her go in the sand. She fell limp. He sat beside her, feeling his drenched suit squish beneath him. He placed a hand on her chest, and the water in her lungs vanished. She inhaled sharply, as if waking from a nightmare, and sat up in the sand. Her face, still bruised and battered, turned to him in disbelief. "Hello, Peeta," he told her, watching her calm down. "You don't know me. In fact, no one does, but..." He paused, wondering how he could sum up the grand juggling act of existence in just a few words. "My name is Windsor. I help people get lost, you see." Her breathing slowed, and she even nodded. "I'd like to offer you an alternative to..." He looked to the water. "To whatever it was you were doing out there." He looked at her. She would be the first person to never forget his face. "Would you like me to help you become lost?" She pondered for a moment, but only for a moment. This has been an excerpt from Danthology 2022. Copyright 2022. For more by Dan Kirstein, visit Cherry and Stone Publishing.